Hello everybody, thanks for seeing and viewing my videos, and today's video will be the final video of the verification of semiconductors. And today's topic will be cover the first, oxidation, and finally and secondly, the doping process. So first see about the oxidation process. The oxidation can be made as, let's say there is a layer of vapor that is just pure silicons, and with some inject oxides to the silicon surface, and also if the oxide is having enough energy to act or react to cut off the covalent bonding between the silicons, then the silicon will be break down, and then the bondage will be quit, and the oxide will be injected, and they will make the another bonding of the SiO2, in short, dioxide silicon. For this class, I just want to call the dioxide silicon as OX for initially. Okay, so see the oxidation. For this trend, the oxidation will be probably be the thermal process, very hot heat and temperatures. So in the thermal process there is two types. First, dry process type, and secondly, the wet type. So why we need the oxidation process? Easy. For the first review, for the first video of this class, we talked about the lithographies. For the lithographies, we needed mask that can block the light, that can block the light effect into the unwanted sector area that should not be reacted by the light. So, for this case, the mask there was a lot of mask that can block the light to be injected to the silicon vapors. So, the most common case will be the silicon dioxide. Silicon dioxide is used for widely. If taking the example for the MOSFET or the MOSCAP, the silicon dioxide will block the channel's injection to the gate, and it will finally make the channel. And then for the lithography respect, the dioxide silicon will block the light being injected to the silicon vapor underside, and finally it will work as a mask. So SiO2 is commonly is a type of the armor pulse. So what is armor pulse? For the class we have run, there was three types. For first, crystalline, and secondly, polycrystalline. Then some are separated mode of the crystalline, and finally the armor pulse. Some are hardly separated of the polysilicons. Just if taking some easy examples, if there was a glass of a square here, when it breaks down, there will be some particles that be scattered. This is some of the state of the armor pulse. Okay, so seeing the dioxide silicon and armor pulse is very important for the last living sector of the doping process. So okay, the first dry process and wet process. For the dry process, here we inject some oxide, double oxide to the silicon vapors, and if the oxide have some internal energy to cut off the covalent bonding between the silicons, and if they insert into between the silicons bonding, then the dioxide silicon will be confirmed. And secondly, the wet process. Simply just using the water. We know the water's compromisation will be the 2H and 1 oxide. So we know the water is some acid. If we For example, let's see there is a steel, some steel here, steel mass here, and we put in water for a long time. Then the steel will have some oxidation process, and the steel will be in a firmly stable process. So dry process and wet process will have some, if they have in the process have some enough energy to react, they shortly called as EA. The energy to be reacted for enough. So for these conditions, the oxidation process will be finally done. So for dry process, it will take a long time since we will use gas to put the oxide in the silicon wafers. So it will take a long time, but since it will be injected between oxide bondings, the breakdown voltage or the formatting will be more hardened than the wet process. For the wet dry, the breakdown voltage will be somewhat downside than the dry side, but it has some benefit of saving the times and cheap process. If just think like this, on the dry process, some are hardened and reliable dioxide, and for the wet press, cheap but can be used commonly and for the making out of the product in a short time. So when doing the oxidation process, there is some important factors you must know. So see the equation of the Fick's law. Fick's law is related to the diffusion process. Okay, so if we talk some about the diffusions, diffusion will be happened by the difference of the concentration between the metal A and metal B. Just taking the example for the p-n junctions. See, my left hand will be the p-type silicon doped, and my right side hand will be the n-type silicon that just been doped. If they met and junction by the bond, then the p-type have lots of holes, and the n-type silicon will have lots of electrons, free electrons, if they meet and junction. For the respect of the p-type silicons, the n-type don't have enough holes, and oppositely, the n-type also do see with not enough of the electrons. So by the difference of the concentrations, the holes will move to the n-type and the electron will move to the p-type silicons. After they move, this will be the diffusion effect. So back into the point, the Fick's law is saying about the continuity and the diffusion law. So see, if I just starting process of the oxidation in the wet side or the dry side anyway. So here is some pure silicon, and I just started to put the oxide here. Then the silicon will make the layer of the dioxide silicons. It will grow up, and the length of the dioxide will be more grow. So see, in a moment, the dioxide length is enough, and the length will be the F0 or the length of oxide. So see, just taking example, the oxidation process is keeping the oxidation process is keep doing, and the oxide is being keep injected. Then, for first, if we start the oxidation first in a short time, or if we just started the oxidation process, then the silicon wafer will strongly react to the oxidation process if the oxide have inner energy, the EA here. So for the first time, the oxidation process will be very fastly reacted, and the oxidation process, the dioxide layer will be processed fastly. But if the inner time has passed, then the oxidation between the surface of dioxide and silicon, there will be not enough oxide. Since they already consumed the oxide to the another, making the dioxide and cutting the covalent bonding between silicon. So I said the oxide keeping being injected through the dioxide here, and I said the dioxide is our probe, so oxide will keep moving through the fractions between the armor probe. Okay. Then this will be the diffusion, since the silicon don't have enough oxide, but dioxide have somewhat enough oxide, and when comparing with the respect of the silicon, so the oxide will be go to the silicons by the diffusion effect. So the equation will be like this: the particles plus ST will be the diffusion coefficient dividing the injected oxide. The injected oxide passes concentration and subtracting the in the interfaces subtracting the interfaces oxide concentration from the being injected in the surface of the dioxide. So how the difference will in the interface and the surface of the dioxide will have, and how the strong the diffusion coefficient it is, and finally how long the dioxide length has been. We will make the how it will make the oxidation process by the diffusion after in a long time. So the equation can be stated like this. For the first, let's see, the A will be the C, the combination I just wrote here. Okay, so within the first time just starting the oxidation process, and the equation will be like this: if the time is just passed not enabling, then the process will be relate to the how the strong oxidation will be injected and how many oxidation has been injected. And secondly, if the time has been passed enough, then the diffusion coefficient will decide how the oxidation process or making the dioxide length longer by the time passed. So the first it will be summarized by the how many molecules been injected and after the time passed enabling. Just in the case of the dioxide, the layer have enough thickness after time passed, then the oxidation process will be concluded by the diffusion coefficient. So the first time starting the injection of the dioxide, starting the process of oxidations have some linear process reactions, and after time pass, somewhat parabolic graph here. So if we track the total graph of the reactions slope, it will be like this: linear and parabolic factor in a time passed, and the reaction of the first time. Okay. So, and for another respect, let's see, we just make some enough thickness of the dioxide Then here's one problem. During the dioxide process, how will the dopant will be redistributed in each rod? How the dopant will be replaced to the rich sector area, to the dioxide, or to the original side that they just belong to, like the silicon vapor or doped silicon. So if the silicons that we just oxided was the somewhat doped silicons, not pure silicons, the P-type or N-type doped silicons, here is some problem. Then where the dopant will go, to the dioxide or to the silicon side? So there are two types. For first, going to the dioxide side, and secondly, moving to the silicon or staying in the silicon side. Then, and another respect. During the dioxide process, I say the oxide will cut off the covalent bonding between each silicons, and they will make new bonding to make the dioxide silicons. So it means the silicons layer will be somewhat sacrificed to turn into the dioxide layer. So here is some equations. The SOS means how long the dioxide has been processed, and the NOS means in the area of the multiplying the distance and distance, just the area. How many areas are in the sector area? How many the oxide is being staying, and it will be the XSR will be meaning how long the distance the silicon has been sacrificed, and NSR will meaning how many silicons were staying in the sector area. Okay, so it should be like this. If the oxide injection was very heavy, then it means the NOS will be more larger, and then the more dioxide layer will be created. For the opposite case, just casing that if they have enough energy to react, then the layer will be somewhat shortened. Okay, next step. So sorry for quitting the videos. The last part of the station will be about the dopant redistribution problems. Just the dopant redistribution problem or issues. So why this happened? Just taking the example that if we were making the oxidation process on the silicon with doped with boron, then it means the only silicon that is doped will have the high density of the borons. And for the dioxide silicon that just been made, we will have some lack of the borons, or during the dioxiding, the boron will decide where I should go, to the silicon inside, or staying here, or going to the dioxide side. So for first, if the dopant having moved to the dioxide side, here's the case. For first, the dopant has been moved to the silicon side at the interface, but with a low diffusion coefficient, then the concentration of the dopant will be concentrated to the silicon dioxide interface here. And if the diffusion was so strong, then the borons will move more far to the silicon's bulk, the deep body side. Then Just see here is some botons inside. But in the interface or surface between the silicons and diode side, the bottom will have some depletion strongly. And secondly, if the dopant have been moved to the silicon or stay in the silicons. And here, but first, its diffusion loss somewhat low, and the dopant will stay to the silicon side. Surely, in the interface, the silicon surface will have some higher boron concentration than the diode side one. Of course, it means the boron will not move to the diode side. Some of them, small amount of the dopant will move to the diode side. And finally, with high diffusion coefficient, by the high diffusion coefficient, the dopant will move fastly to the silicon's very deep side, and the interface side boron concentration will be somewhat lowered since they move to deep body side the bulk. Okay, thank you for sharing, and we will be moving to the last step, the doping. Reading second topic about dopings. So doping. I believe what you are doping it is. Doping means somewhat changing the electron or hole. In short, the carrier's density into which spice that can be the holes or electrons. So anyway, doping can be meant as making the silicon as some source of the electrons or holes. So derivative type for P type and N type of silicons. And today's review will be about the doping process. Same as the previous one about the oxidation, doping process also takes the high temperature process. So about from 800 to 1100 degrees. So, and there is two type of doping. Well, first, thermal diffusion, and secondly, the ion implantation. Thermal diffusion, as its name, using the thermal heat and pressures, and by the difference between the using the difference of concentration between the materials. So, for first, place the dopant material on the surface, and secondly, with the pressure with gas or heat, the dopant will be diffused by the difference of the concentration of each materials. And then we know if the higher temperature, the metals will react more actively. So first, pre-diffusion on the surface, and then driving, it means being doping mode. So when using the thermal diffusion, there is one important rule. It will be fixed law. Well, first, somewhat related to the diffusion law that we just talked previous reviews about the oxidation, and secondly, the fifth law about the continuous equations. So continuous equation means that if there is a one-time insert and if there is no loss of the energy or signals, the internal reactions or total response will be same to the input one. Okay. Here's one condition, but for the continuous equation, no additional input and no external or internal loss out. So continuous equation about the areas and multiplying the flux response of loss density will be the each areas by the time response total summation. So here's some equations and I hope you know what it is meaning. So for the thermal doping, The first, constant source. It means keeping the dopant source to be injected inside. And secondly, the limited source. Limited source can be meant as just place one time the materials on the surface and it's done. So maybe the limited source can be meant as one time and one time dot, it will be end. But constant source can be meant keeping the dopant on being injected and applied. Then the dopant will keep larger and larger. Of course, if there is some enough activation energy and some conditions that can be doped, such as the dopant have enough energy to quit out the covalent bonding between the silicons and making another link or connections between the silicons and dopant like borons. So this means, so see, let's get this is a silicon and we started just doping on the surface. The FK, the F means the height that been doped. So the first, for the constant source, this case means the dopant source is keeping supplied continuously, and the equation of how the density will be the dot is will be like this. So the total charge will be the total charge that dopant will have will be the total distance of the how the areas has been doped and how many there are dopant is there in a area. Like this. So and then so we say if the distance is eternal, then it means to the last edge or eternal edge the dopant couldn't be reached, so it can be mean that the last sector area is not doped yet, so the density of the dopant will be 0. But here for first, since the first area, the first sector area is same as the dopant solubility, which can be same as the dopant's density of being supplied, and secondly the limited one. So it means just one time with a limited amount, the dopant amount will be set. So here is the equations about, and for the limited, the equation will be related to the error function. So finally it will be related to the how the diffusion will be more deeper, and if there is more energy, and if the diffusion coefficient is more higher, the deeper and more larger the dopant area will be happened. Okay, and then taking this equation first, we can draw a graph of if for the first constant source keeping the dopant inside. If we have more higher energy or higher diffusion coefficient, then the more deeper and larger the dopant will injected and will have more higher density of electron or hole, whatever, meaning the main source of the carriers. So the dopant will go far and more farther if there is more energy and more higher diffusion density. In secondary, for the limited source mode, in this case, maybe the area will be somewhat look same. For the first, if the diffusion coefficient is somewhat low, and maybe it can be meant as somewhat lower energy. And secondly, and third, maybe if they have more far energy, it will be like this. Sorry, if the dopant is somewhat more lighter, or if the different coefficient is different, then each difference of the graph about the impurity concentration will be happened for the time or distance. Okay, the secondary junction positions. See, we just started doping if the silicon was not pure, if the silicon was somewhat lightly doped silicon with p-type or n-type, which means we have some species of carrier such as electrons or holes. So yes, the technical example if we are doping on an n-type silicon, here's the mask, we will dope here, then if we dope with p-type, here we will change the p-type. So see the graph overflow will be meaning the p-type injection of the dopant, and the lower band will meaning the somewhat heat means heat average. Heat balanced anti-silicons. So the total graph, the total impurity concentration will be like this. But in the respect of after the recombining and with the net impurity concentrations, the graph will be changed like this. P-type here with the distance, p-type will be here, and after same as the n-type of silicon will have. If the n-types of silicon have some inner area or distance. Okay, so it can be meant as within driving process, how the diffusion coefficient is being changed and what kind of the dopant you're using, the sector area that been doped, or how long the dopant will be lasted, and how the dopant will process will be changing. So, and secondary, about the ion implantations. So, ion implantation means just before starting about the ion implantation, let's talk about the heat process. Maybe can be meant as annealing. Annealing means heating process with high temperature in a short time, in a minute or even a second. So mostly the annealing means just bake somewhat. We talked about the doping and oxidation will in higher temperature process. So here is some heating lamp like argon or halogens. Here is a vapor we just process and we cover down the vapor. Then again, after enough time passed, we apply again. Then the heat process will be ended and the dopant process somewhat will be done. But at here's some problem. After ending the process of the heating, there will be some remaining heat. Even the heating process has been ended, which means, let's guess, you just boil the water for 10 minutes. Okay, now you finish your cooking, but the water will have some remaining heat. Of course, it will not be closer to the 100, maybe 16 or 100 degrees, 60 or 50 degrees. So it means some remaining heat will affect to the process of the dopant. So it will affect for unwanted effect, unwanted result. And summer budget. So each material have each one's property and maybe have some difference of how it can endure or how it can withstand or withstand about the high temperatures. So if material A can be withstand about 8 degrees, but if the heat process is over than the 800 degrees, then the material A will break down or change into another forms, such as from crystalline to amorphous, or some liquid. So if there is same materials for A, B, C here, A will stand about 8 degrees and the material C will stand about 1000 and the material A will stand about 700 degrees Celsius, sorry. So if we process the doping process with 800, then the material A will break down and only the B and C material will survive. So this is my project, which means how many time and how many thermal heat can be the budget or somewhat usable one for the process. So so we say the time and in the heat high temperature. So maybe if we keeping the heat the long time, maybe the remaining heat will affect the process. So for this case we use the laser or the light with high density with a super high temperature. The light maybe can take the strong energy to the surface, but in a very short time, like in a nanosecond or millisecond. So, and then the heat will vanish soon as the time has been not enough short. Okay, thank you, and we will going to talk about the more details of the ion implantation. Okay, so greeting again, and the last video and the last sector of the review videos. And topic review about the doping. About the ion implantation. For the previous word, we talked about the thermal doping, and now it is about ion implantation. In short, ion doping. So, ion implantation will be somewhat similar as the etching the part with the related with the part of the ion. So, so simple as ion milling, somewhat similar but somewhat different. So ion milling is for the purpose of the making the collisions and taking of the surface materials. But for the ion implantation, it will be somewhat making some collision and impact, but making the space and taking the ions to be placed in the right space to be doped in a silicon wafer. Okay, so see. For ion implantation, differently to the thermal process of doping, it is very precise and have some uniformity if compared with the thermal process. So it can have some high quality product finished, but of course, no pain, no gain. As we can know, the more higher level the process or the material is, the more expensive and the more complicated process will be done. So let's see. When doing the doping with ion implantation, ion may be like the boron plus natural substance, some electrons from the molecule. So before starting the ion process, we check how the charge in the electron will be, the ion is being injected or beamed or bombarded. So we make an aperture between the mask and check the area that receiving the ion's beam. So we learn about the current is separating the mean time with the mean charge. So applying this, the total charge will be related to the time and multiplying the current power. So for the area dose, which means in the area or the volume, in the area how many the dopant or the ions for dopant is staying here, or maybe the charge, how many charge that derived from the dopant is staying in a sector area or mean area. So it means charge in space per area. And if we just divide in two, and multiplying again 3 times with same one, we can make this equation that relates with the volume dose. So here are some programs and factors. When doing the ion implementation, maybe the ion will have some going straight vector, so these 3 problems. But first, the channeling. So for the previous class of the videos, we learn about the surfaces mode for first 100 and secondly 0110 and finally 111. In a cube of the silicon lattice, for this moment and for this moment, and here the plane model, there will be typical free plane type of the silicon lattice or Mercurius mode. So if we somehow look deeperly with the respect of the planes or the internal plane or external plane, we can see some cores that can be penetrated like this, or some small areas that the ions can pass straight if they have some high energy and some moderate angle. So draw this hole, and it's some straight tube. You can pass through the cores on some inner space that can be go straight if it's possible with degrees and energy. So at this moment, during the channeling effect, the electrons that attract to the positive ions will came out and they will make some electric field, and the electric field will attract the ions that going straight, and the ion that have some positive factor will be attracted to the electric field that the electron is keeping making and attracting. So the the ion will be more some lost its energy on and will emit some the ion finally will have the energy less than the EA or wanted or just planned, and finally maybe it will have some weakened doping effect, or even it can be have binary collision but can't replace the nucleus place, and even it can't go deep enough for the we wanted as a result. And secondary collision, just meaning impact between the nuclear and the ions that been isolated. The isolated ion will means have high power or high energy, and when being impacted with the nuclear will be came out and the place will be replaced with ion. But here is problem. Since I said the collisions, it will be okay if they just hit one time and replace the ions that we just wanted to be let the ion inside. But if the collision will be keep happening, if we take some examples, see here is some molecules is nuclear ion being emitted. Collision 1, collision 2, collision 3, collision 4, collision 5. So it means that some ions will not go straight and will change their direction, and maybe go to unwanted direction, and will have somewhat more larger or more smaller. Anyway, somewhat unwanted area that we wanted to produce for the doping process. And then the collision will make some the damage abilities. This will be talked later. And finally, the scattering, especially the back scattering. Similar to the topic that I just talked with the collisions. But back scattering means keeping collision being impacted and reflected, impact, reflect, and finally, with the moderate angle, and if we have some inner energy to be reflected, it will be backward to the injected side. So the doping will not be go as we want to be done as a result. So with the collision and channeling, or even the backward scattering, we can know there will be some stopping power related to let the ion inside in the doping target. The stopping power, the S will be related to the nuclear stopping power and electric field stopping power. So collision will be related to electronic stopping power, since when ions that have positive vector path, the electron will be attracted to the positive ion. The stopping power of the collision will be related to the nuclear impact stopping power and the electrons attracting stopping power. And for the channeling, since there will be only few or no impact between the nucleus, so there will be only the attrition power of the electrons between the positive ion. And finally, the scattering back will be related to only the impact and being reflected. So, taking these examples and vectors, we can say if we have, of course, this vector with some a few moments. So we can say like this: the Gaussian distribution rule will be adopted, which means all samples have the average and some variance, and finally they will have some the correct model for the average like this. I know what this meaning, and see, if we are doping on a p-type silicon here, then we started the doping with n-type or n-type dopant. Then it will be meaning how the height they have the most highest value will be meaning that at this distance, the number one, the most ions will be collected and make some dopant area, a doped area. In here, of course, some of them will be past the interface between the silicons and the dopant areas junction, and will be injected to the original one silicon area. So here the interface between the dopant area and the p-type silicon, the original one silicon that is a target of the doping. The distance will be called as a junction depth. It means how deeply the junction has been created. And the mean project range, just meaning how the range that mostly the ions will be injected. So it means if we have more higher energy, or which can be means more higher accelerated velocity, it will become like this. The more higher and the more deeper and more larger the space will be created of the dopant. Like this, okay? And then for the mass, if with the same energy, if the mass is more heavier and heavier, then the dopant will be go less distance. Of more lighter, the better, deeper dopant will be go inside. But if more harder the dopant is, the more damage during the collision or impact, there will be more damage induced. This will talk later. Okay, so selective doping. The selective doping of the process. So here is the mask. It can be the SiO2 and polysilicon anyway that can block the being injected of the ions to the unwanted space. So the space that is unmasked will be done well with the ion stopping process. But this sector must be not. The sector that is under the mask should not be masked as we wanted and as we made. So it means the mask will reflect the ions, or the mask will taking the ions inside to be absorbed underneath this silicon vapors. So for example, the dioxide that works as a mask will have somewhat the ions inside, which means it has blocked wear. So at here, of course, it will be applied by the Gaussian distribution law or graph, like this I just talked previously. And then here's one problem. We say all these vectors, so the more deeper and deeper the ion is injected, the larger maybe the doping area will be more creative. So so it means making the shallow and thin and small area for just inevitably we need to make is so making some shallow surface, the bond area here will be made only the result that will be close to our product. So some equations about the doped area and distance is here. The area of doping will be related to this. So meantime, projected will be the RP and the F0 will be some FJ will be some junctions, distance steps. And here's one thing. Of course, we talked that the the dioxide silicon is amorphous, which means it has some holes and fractions, so maybe there is some possibility and some probability that the ions can pass through the amorphous and penetrate straight to the silicon vapor. So maybe just some bad case, the dop effect will be happen even under the mask. But so we talk like this. It's possible the underneath area of over the silicons area should not be doped under the 10/1 of the silicon that been intended to be doped. Okay. And finally, the effect of the lattice damaging and some act we just want to talk. The lattice damage will happen within these factors. So we say if something heavy and lighter is coming up, and here is some mass here, when being emitted with the same power being applied, about 100 joule, then the mass that being emitted with the more heavier will have some more larger impact, and they will have some more damage when compared with the lighter one. So lattice damage will be more happen if the ion is more fast and more heavier. The damage will be more added and will be enlarged. Of course, for the light one, the deeper will be the but more heavier the height will be more enlarged. The distance will be somewhat low, but this is a critical problem. When processing the silicon was polycrystalline or crystalline, but within this process the silicon mode will be changed to amorphous even more than separate than the or critical than the amorphous. So at the moment the restoring will be available in the heating process. When taking the heating, the bondage will be linked again, then the amorphous will be changed to the polycrystalline or crystalline. So restoring is available within the heating process finally. Okay, thanks for listening. and we did great job for the summer vacations. See you guys if you can. Goodbye.